Welcome to Blackopolyse podcast media with Nigel, Quay, and your boy Astalio. And we're going into our little series podcast now. So today we're talking about, of course, Black History Month, although it should be called Black History, and that's it. Period. Finished. But for some reason, we only get a month in a year. I've never really understood it, but yeah. Quay's our expert today. She's gonna, no pressure. She's gonna be bouncing off me, and Nigel's gonna be, of course, chiming in as well. We are not experts. I don't. Well, Quay, would you consider yourself an expert on Black history? How much do you know?
I'm a Black American who knows a lot.
Okay.
I studied cultural anthropology and a bunch of other useless stuff in college, so I do have like more than a layman's person knowledge of Black history and all history, but expert.
Wow. It's probably more than what we know. We've got
that's fantastic.
our knowledge is probably as far as Google.
Sparse. So you've actually got courses which are just about Black history in America.
In college, yeah.
I mean, I don't know anything about the college in the UK, and maybe there are courses, but that's fantastic. It's a shame they have to almost specialize in it after you've left school, as opposed to kind of making you see that it's part of the fabric of the whole kind of way that the world has turned. But yeah,
I'll say that the American system, I'm pretty sure this is like any Western, although I've heard Canadians have a much better grasp of history than we do, except for when it comes to Indigenous history. I guess it's whoever's the most oppressed in that area. Those are the ones that quiet silence a little bit. But our history is here in the US, it's American history, but only really focused on the white people and how other people somehow interacted. Like I've heard there's one Texas school that tried to have it saying that Africans came over as workers. So it's very manipulative. Africans came as workers. In my son's AP World History book, it asks how Native Americans benefited from European exchanges. So very much with the stuff you learned. I learned personally, and what drew the line for me with history was the Spanish put Cubans into concentration camps, period. That happened. Americans put Filipinos into densely packed areas with low sanitation and poor health and lack of food access. You mean a concentration camp? Just say a concentration camp. So it's like very sugar-coated how we present any history that isn't European history. We will talk about the Holocaust in painful detail. We will talk about what happened with the Irish in less painful detail. And it's very weird because they don't go too far into what happened to the Irish in Britain when we talk about British history. They just say, and then the Irish had the potato famine. That wasn't all of it. Like they practiced on the Irish and brought it over to everyone else.
It always used to amaze me growing up, watching the news and seeing these white people bombing these white people. And I thought I was naive when I was young. It was like, hold on, I thought they all hated us. How come they're killing each other? But then I used to look at what used to go on in some of the other countries around the world where ethnic people were killing each other, and that always used to strike me as really strange. And people will disagree with me, but I know most certainly with the Irish problem, it was all down to religion. It was down to Catholics, Protestants.
Sort of. And I know we're supposed to be talking about Black history, but the Irish were the N-words of their day in Europe. It hadn't because if you look at the Irish, the Protestant versus Catholic Reformation, then the Spanish would have been suffering just as much as the Irish. The persecution of the Irish and the Scottish in England happened before even Roman times. It is. going back to like the Pict Rebellion. And they're not, the Picts were Irish, obviously. So it's almost like Rome brought oppression to England.
Yeah.
And with the oppression of the Picts, and then I fully believe they killed like a lot of the Picts too.
Yeah.
And then they took that oppression and said, okay, let's move north. Okay, now here's Ireland and Scotland.
Well,
and then they're like, we're done with them. Let's go to the Americas. Now let's go to China.
Well, and that's the thing, the narrative that I've always understood, because the way it's reported in the media is Protestants, Catholics, Muslims, Christians. You know what I mean? It's always, you know, they follow that. So we're that, which means we're opposite to that. And like I say, I know that most certainly in the 19th century, when people who were Catholic were going for jobs in Ireland, Northern Ireland, that they were like overlooked for certain positions. For Protestants, almost like a black man going for a job, being told, well, now because there's a white guy standing behind you. So it just amazed me how, I don't know, how people can look at people and decide, right, because you are different or you think a different way, I'm going to treat you completely different. It's just weird, man.
It's a primate trait. It is an inherently primate thing, and it's actually not even just primates. All animals. We tribes, seek sameness in tribes, and like what's the known versus the unknown, and so it's all about making sure that your children have the best future possible. And to do that, you kind of have to make sure that other kids can't compete, and that's kind of how I look at the struggles we're still having in the United States. That it's not that people don't know that there's white supremacy here or that there's white privilege. It's that they don't care, because of course, look what happens when you let Black people into sports. They dominated. Look what happens when you let Asians into the colleges. They dominated. There has to be a way for some poor white kid from rural Georgia to be able to compete. And the way he competes is he grows up and he's white and he gets opportunity. He works hard to get that chance, but he gets the leg up because no one else can compete with them. And that's how our country, my country, has been set up, that for the longest periods, no one could compete. And if you did compete, you died or you were attacked or Black businesses destroyed, Native Americans just massacred, Asians just weren't even allowed to be citizens till like the 60s. When we were fighting for our rights as American citizens, Asians who had been here since the 1800s were fighting for the right to be citizens.
Crazy. Absolutely crazy.
Okay. So
it's
sorry.
Maybe I am an expert.
You're actually apparently, yeah. So okay, we want to start. The first question, of course, today is, and of course, the title of the whole podcast for today is, what is Black history? What is it? I did a little search, obviously, on the internet, and I found out that actually it was originally called Negro History Week by a guy called Carter G. Woodson. And he wanted to bring it in, obviously, for a week just for the recognition of Black people in America. He set it from the day of the 12th of February, so the first day was the Abraham Lincoln's birthday, until Frederick Douglass' birthday on the 20th. And that was the original start of Black History Month. But firstly, obviously, it started off as a week with a different name, of course, too. Which actually I don't really mind calling that, because Negro is not bad. The other one is, which I don't like, but Negro is not too bad, I guess. That's like the light version. Yeah. So
what does, I don't like any of them.
I mean, you don't want to hear any of it, but I mean, if you think about it, we was originally called the Negroids. So that's all it is. It's just a shortening down of the original.
We're still called Negroids. Our racial classification, when we talk about people from different areas, you have the Caucasoids, and then the super offensive Mongoloids, and then the even more offensive Negroids. That is maybe both are like super offensive, but that's how science classifies.
That's the language they use to describe that race, isn't it? And that's what's filtered through. And I suppose if someone had gone there and said, I don't know, Afro hairs, would we now be sitting there going, is that offensive? Because I suppose it's the language of the time, isn't it?
Didn't they call us that?
I believe it becomes the Spanish terminology. A Spanish word for Black is Negro.
Even Latin is
Latin? And Latin, or I'm not sure. I know that it has something to do with the Moors in Spain,
Yeah.
And that's how it was started, and it was like a common colloquialism. Because I don't think the Moors were calling the Africans Negroids, but I think the Spanish were calling the Moors, who were slightly, North African. They're calling them Negroids, and then you have like, there's some even more Negroid. They're darker. And then the name stuck. I'm not 100% positive, but I believe that's where the nomenclature came from, and it just stuck.
Most of them Spanish descent from the Moors anyway. I don't know what they're going on with. You face the trace back, man, they'd be shocked. They'd be like, oh.
They actually...
I'm going to do a DNA test because I want to know what part of Africa my genes started from, man.
If you do a DNA test, do one from Africa and not like 23andMe or what is the other one? Ancestry. Africa actually has a database that they've been collecting, and it is for this purpose for people of African descent to find out where they're from. It's much more accurate. It's like Guyanese, Nigerian, and I forget what the issue with 23andMe and Ancestry is that they'll throw some stuff in. They're looking at allele matches, which everyone kind of does. But just to put in perspective, two twins can submit their DNA, and turns out like, this twin somehow is Scandinavian. Well, this one has like 3% Native, and this one's 2% Black. And it's really, and the companies that admitted to this, they were throwing in ethnic origins to try to combat racism. So they're telling people who were, purely Scandinavian that they're part African, and they're like, okay.
No, they kept that one quiet. Bloody hell. So I'm gonna
say this like 5 or 6 years ago.
Bloody hell.
Yeah. Okay, so back to Black history.
Yeah, so what is
Black history is two things. All right, so there's the Black history that we get drilled in us in school. And what that is essentially is a memorization of a couple names. You get the same names every year: Rosa Parks, Sojourner Truth, Martin Luther King, and you just George Washington Carver. And these are like the things like elementary school kids are taught. It's very watered down. And when I said earlier, like, we will get the Holocaust in painstaking detail every year for our entire life. We should all learn about the Holocaust. What we don't get is actual information about Black history in the elementary schools and middle schools. It's just for 1 month, you recognize facts. This guy did the first open heart surgery. This guy did the first this. And sometimes those facts aren't even accurate. So that it leads to kids be feeling trivialized or not. What it does lead to is at least the white kids not getting the full scope. The Black kids are going to eventually learn it. They're going to learn it from their experiences. They're going to learn it from their families. The white kids might never get this much needed information. And that's the second part of Black history. And that is the history of America, the history of the world, and how countries and people existed that not in context of white people, or in context with white people, but with the sad parts, like the Rosewood race riots. I think if you were to ask the average any kid, school-age child, about any race riot, they wouldn't know anything. They don't talk about that. They don't tell us about things that would lead for a young white person to actually understand what privilege means. And that's the second part of Black history, is understanding that. And I'd say that's not just Black history, that's Native American history, that's Asian American history, knowing the actual history, how things work, how things interwove, and how our country became how it is today. And that's the part we don't get. We don't get those gut-wrenching stories, or even those great accomplishment stories. Like Hidden Figures. I was just watching that yesterday.
Yeah, it's a great film.
I've never heard of that. Like, we learned NASA, obviously, but we learned Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin, and those key names. We don't learn about any of the other people who participated in it, or that math was a big part of it. I mean, growing up, we we're just like, they shot up the moon.
And one of the main things for me with that as well, which I don't think people have picked up on, not only did they hide that because they were Black, they hid it because they were women.
Yeah.
Think about it. It was women.
If it was a Black man, we would have known about it.
Well, I'm not even sure. What I'm saying, they were Black and they were women. It was almost like a double whammy. It's like how, all these aspiring women in those times who would have seen those ladies as role models. These ladies helped us put a man on the moon. I mean, It's crazy, man. It's crazy.
The women we learn about are women who are generally in traditional female roles, like Madam C.J. Walker. She made the first million because she invented a hair care product. We don't hear about the first Black female battalion in the World War II. We don't hear about them. Yeah. We hear about Black men when they're in masculine roles or when they've done something super exceptional. So, of course, we know all the Black men sports heroes. We learn all of the Black men who were sports heroes and who, what was the other thing? Sports heroes. Yeah, I'd say that's a context. And then military. Yeah. Sports hero and military. But we don't hear about, I used to learn about Thurgood Marshall. He was the Black lawyer who did, oh my God, I'm a horrible Black person. Brown versus Board of Education. So he did that trial. He's the first Black, he was first Black member of the Supreme Court. I learned about that, but I didn't know anything else about him. Nothing. Whereas I learned everything there is to possibly learn about Benjamin Franklin, right down to things that really don't matter. We learned about they were taught about the Hammurabi Code.
What? Yeah.
There's just this big thing that happened recently where they were teaching the kids about the Hammurabi Code, and it's like, how would you treat your slave? And my first thought was, we got time to teach the Hammurabi Code, but we can't teach about Black Wall Street. Like, what is this?
Yeah.
That was a class exercise. Teachers got in trouble. But it was like basically having the kids interpret the Hammurabi Code. But that's so ancient. We have other stuff we could be learning about. You know, They tell us we don't have time to go over everybody's history, but we have all this extra time to do bull crap like that.
Yeah, like religious. When you're gonna learn about religion, we've got all the time.
The thing with history is based on where you are, if that makes sense. So if you're born in Africa, you're going to learn, I would say you're going to learn more African history.
Don't you remember when we was in South Africa? Remember we had Rotunda on our show a few months back, and she told us she was learning European history too. And I was like, you didn't learn African history. I mean, that wasn't exactly what she said, but she went along those lines that in Africa.
Yeah, but I suppose
in every colonized civilization, for the most part, when they say world history, they mean Europe.
Yeah.
And when they say European history, they mean Britain.
Yeah. Another thing is Louis Latimer. You know Louis Latimer? He was actually the inventor of electricity and the light bulb. But Thomas Edison, also known as Con Edison, stole that from him. So there's all that.
He stole everything.
Yeah, wow.
Edison was the biggest damn thief. Like, I don't even know why we still teach kids about him.
I think it was one of those. I think what did they managed to? I think they managed to trick a lot of Black people back in the past by not teaching them.
I don't think it was trick. I think it was force.
Well, force or tricked. I think it's, if you couldn't read back in the day, you know, you could get into a contract which, you know, didn't include you. You know what I mean? So that's what it was. It was keep the people dumb, even though like Black, you know, Black people.
Okay. So I just want to clarify. Anyone who he worked with was someone who was educated enough to invent stuff. Whether it was Black or whatever, he stole from everybody. But the people he worked with were poor, destitute, and desperate. And so he'd get these contracts, and in the writing, it would say like, I retain all rights.
Yeah.
And it's still like that today. Like if someone works for Pfizer and they invent, I don't know, cure for COVID tomorrow, they don't get that patent. Pfizer does.
Yeah. And that's the thing. It's about, if you think about it as well, this will come back down to knowledge, education, knowing that you haven't got to sign that contract, knowing that you can go elsewhere and get a second opinion, having someone you can trust in your community who will
but
tell
not
you
if you're Black, and especially not in the day.
But not exactly that. And that's what they would have struggled with back in that time, because they wouldn't have had those Black lawyers. They wouldn't have had people they could speak to in their community who could have given them that knowledge and said, well, no, don't sign that because A, B, and C. So it's tough, man. We've almost like been held back, but still managed to break through, if that makes sense. Been held back, almost like, let's try and keep these guys dumb. But the reality is we've broke through that barrier. Now we're searching for our own flipping future, our own journey. So,
and as a nerdy Black woman, I can say that for Black people. I'm in America at least. And we're making strides against that. But it is far more profitable for you to be athletic or pretty than it is for you to be smart.
And even that's an uphill struggle, isn't it?
I think that's across the board, though, isn't it? I think if you look at any country, east or west, it's all about, you know, looking good and false.
Well, I was thinking along the lines of going into the entertainment. Like, you make your money here entertaining white people. That's the fastest track. And if you're just like the nerd, if you're just like a nerd, like for me, I wanted to be a neurosurgeon, actually, pediatric neurosurgeon. And I went to school, got my neuroscience degree, graduated with honors. I was supposed to be over there across the pond with you guys after studying in Oxford or something, but you know, life took other tracks. But when I got into the science world, I was treated like I was a complete idiot and dumb and wasn't allowed to do anything sciencey. I could shuffle their papers for them. And I was told point blank that because I was Black and because I was a woman, unless I went and got my PhD, I would never do anything or go anywhere. I would be stuck in those paper pusher jobs. And I could have stuck that out. Unfortunately, I was dealing with a lot of racist abuse in my jobs as a Black female that I just couldn't stomach long enough to get into a PhD program. And I am not the only person who I've met that's experienced that as a Black woman in science. And it makes it very discouraging. So every time you guys see on Twitter, follow every Black woman or Black man that's a astrophysicist or a neuroscientist or something, because that accomplishment is a big deal. Not because Black people aren't smart enough, not because we lack the education or, you know, don't have resources.
So what does it require then for people of color who are in that position? Why can't you guys just get together and start your own thing?
Well, I didn't have those kind of connections. And there are people who are working. I mean, when I was in science, it felt like I was the only Black person. Like, I had no idea where all the Black people who I was in college with went. Yeah. I assumed they all went to I was a neuroscience major. We had plenty. They all went to damn England. But yeah, so I had a lot of Black kids in my neuroscience program. It was like as many Black kids as there were Asian kids, which is a lot. College is where I've met my first Asian person. I was like, oh my God. Oh wait, that's racist. But for real, we had a lot of them. But then when I entered into the world of science, working, I was like the only one.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it was years. I'd say it was at least 6 years before I met my next Black person. And that next Black person job with another Black person, there was a big racial issue right then too. Like, our boss got fired. I was working on the team who was doing Ebola. And our boss got herself fired being super racist to my coworker. And in response to that, she started buddying up to me. And I was like a brand new hire. And she's like, so how about that Mike Brown, huh? I'm like, what? I said, what? But that was for her to like try to show she wasn't racist. So every job I've had in science, it was either me getting racially abused or someone else being racially abused. No. And so it takes a lot for someone to go through that and get through that long enough to get their PhD and get these like advanced degrees. And I wasn't cut out for that. I already experienced enough bullshit in my childhood that I was just like, you know what, fuck all you guys. Oops, sorry. There goes your advertising money.
A little bit of French, man. You've just woke up Wayne's mum. She's like, what? Who's swearing? Who's swearing, Paddy Show? Oh, God, I was just dozing off.
Okay. So, okay, I got another question there, just to keep it into the theme, the topic. So I pretty much said, like, when was Black history was introduced? Obviously, what was the first instance of Black history being introduced? It started off with Woodson, but is there any? I mean, that was the guy who found it, but was there any cases before it? Because I believe.
Before that, I don't know. I know when I was growing up, there was debates. There was debates about Martin Luther King Day. Like, I know when I was little, we got Martin Luther King Day, and maybe around 3rd grade is when we started actively having Black History Month.
Yeah, so like
and it was
69, 70s.
No, I'm not that old. So that just puts it in context. It may have been a thing that was said, but as far as in practice, but it may have to do with something that I grew up with in Georgia, but like in Georgia and Indiana, I didn't recall having Black History Month until about third grade. And then it was the beginning of George Washington Carver, Rosa Parks. And just so we're clear, they highlight the ones that they think are good. So we get Rosa Parks, we don't get Claudette Colvin. We get Martin Luther King, we don't get Medgar Evers. We don't hear about the Nat Turner Rebellion until in context of like talking about slavery and the Civil War outside of Black History Month, because we have to, because then they can say he was a bad guy versus this is a guy who's fighting for the life of his people. So it's like name memorization.
Didn't they? They destroyed his biography before he got released. They destroyed the actor. His name's something. I think his name's Nate something too, and they destroyed his. Sorry. He
was killed. The Nat Turner Rebellion.
No, not that one. Sorry, they did a film. I think it was Birth by Nation or something.
Yes,
Birth of a Nation, and they really destroyed it before because the guy who was acting in it, he did something stupid. I don't know. He messed with a girl, or at least they got the classic. A girl comes out and says, "Yeah, he touched me," and that was it. And everyone was boycotting all the films and stuff. Said no, and then that film like completely flopped. And it was like, they're clever because they didn't want too many people to know about it, so they put it in. They perfectly executed it.
They don't want for people to have that kind of revolutionary idea set. There's a really successful show program here called Underground.
Mm-hmm.
One of the most popular shows on TV. And it was about a group of slaves who escaped a plantation. The pitch was it's 24, but with slaves. And that's exactly how it played out. It was amazing. And it got canceled abruptly, highest rated show on the network, because the network wanted to go a different direction. And then to say, but we're not racist, they canceled a show that was about white people that were it was called Outsiders, and they were like living against the grid and off the grid of the government and fighting government, being all in their crap. So they canceled that one too. It was nowhere near as highly as rated as Underground. But it was like, see, we canceled both our popular programs. We're not racist. No, you just didn't want a story where it's like that level of Black empowerment, where it's Black people succeeding without any intervention of white people. It's very weird. Although that show did have white people, and they were really powerful on that show. They had me rooting for a freaking slave catcher. Parts of that show.
I've had a quick look, and it says here that so one of the reasons they're saying it was cancelled because the parent company was attempted to be purchased by a conservative corporation, Sinclair Broadcasting Group, which led to speculation that the latter did not approve of the subject matter of the show. So, it's...
At the time, they claimed it was just too expensive to make.
Yeah, like Game of Thrones.
Which, funnily enough, did it have one black... Actually, it had the solid guys in there, but didn't really have any black people in there either, did it? I think two mixed race people.
Black people didn't hang around where there was dragons, man. They ain't mad. We ain't got time for them dragons, man. We know where we need to be. That's not fighting dragons. That's
a serious statement there, because look, if you think about dragons, where does that culture come from?
Everywhere had dragons. China? Everyone had dragons.
Yeah, everyone had dragons, but look, mainly that's promoted by the Chinese. Do you also talk about the dragon? Then again, if you look at the flags, I guess.
Yeah, well, if you look at the Komodo dragon, which is in Indonesia, they would have actually had something, and who knows how big those were back in the day. So they probably got something to base dragons on. And if you think of the Europeans going there and seeing it, it's like a mythical beast, isn't it? It allowed the imagination to run wild, and then they could just write about it and turn it into stories. And
I was reading that it's possible that ancient cultures stumbled upon, like we stumble on dinosaur fossils all the time, that they stumbled on these fossils and they're like dragons, and that would explain why the dragons in Asia look different than the dragons in Europe, and the dragons in Africa look different than the dragons in US. Like everywhere had dragons. They didn't have the same name, but there were always these lizard beasts that were big. And I'm thinking, I personally agree that they just stumbled on dinosaur fossils.
So Key, are you? So have you got a website? Have you got a blog? Are you sharing this knowledge in any way with anybody else, or is it all just stuck in your head?
Yeah, she does that stuff. But I'm thinking, no.
Quite. For this,
Can you answer that after? Nigel, we'll get back.
I was going to say, just my son.
So that we'll get back to that after because we're like kind of mid-show, and we can talk about that at the very end. She can tell you.
Oh yeah, I wasn't going to talk about that. I'd say as far as this, the only person I really share this knowledge with is with my son. I've got him a little bit. He's woke AF.
He's woke. Yeah,
and I feel like he has to be because he's biracial. And he's got a double battle to fight because he has people who don't consider him Black. He considers himself Black. And he can probably recite Black history better than I could ever.
Yeah. Actually, it's funny you should say that because when I was at home with my family in England, we got into a bit of a discussion, me and my siblings, and they were like, we was talking about our kids because all our kids are biracial. And I said, like, I tell my kids they're Black. I'm sorry, my kids are Black. That's it. You know, I do recognize that they've got mix, but at the end of the day, when they go out in the street, they're going to be seen as Black, and that's it. They live in Germany, so it's even worse. My family members turned around to me and said, "My kids are not Black." I was like, "Yeah, they are." No, they're not. And we got into this like heated discussion about if mixed race kids can be ever considered Black or not. And I was like, I look at my kids and I say they're Black. If you look at your kids and say they're white, you can recognize your white side, but believe me, as soon as they go on the street, the police see them, or they're going to be hanging around their friends.
In the real world, they are Black.
Because, yeah.
And this is what else makes me laugh about other cultures when they're racist towards Afro-Americans, Afro-Caribbeans, Africans, full stop. Because if you strip it all back, when it comes to the day, they would all be called a derogatory name by the European. Every single one of them, but for some reason they think they're on a higher level because, well, I'm this shade, you're Black, and it really amazes me. So yeah, you're right, Ray. They're Black because the world will see them as Black. You won't see them as anything else.
Yeah. Well, if they can tell that they're Black, my son has some great stories. There is the time where he went and did a presentation on Indonesia, and he brought a Muslim praying mat that I just happened to have from when my old days, and he was immediately told. I have weird stories, but he was told that he was a Muslim and a terrorist, and the reason he killed all the people in 9/11, and he's the reason everything was wrong with the country. Because my son, he's fair skinned, he has a pointy nose, he has pouty lips, but they're bright red, and he has curly hair, but not loose curls. So he has very much Afro texture hair, but it's just slightly looser curl than normal. But his skin is so pale, he sunburns. So people don't usually know what he is. So first he's Arab. They thought he was Arab, so he's the terrorist. When Trump was elected, they thought he was Mexican. So all of a sudden he's being told he's going to get deported. And he's just looking at these kids like...
This is what I'm saying to you. Any shade of colour, any shade... You know what I mean? You're going to be you'll be pointed out and seen as different. So you're right, Wayne. They are.
They're Black.
And the thing is, though, they should be proud of both of their sides.
They should be proud of both, of course.
They should know the reason why some people will treat them a different way. That's what they need to understand, and they need to understand where that comes from. And
in America, that's. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I'm so sorry.
And just how to deal with it emotionally, because. You know, when you're young, you shrug it off. As you get older, you can get a little bit angry. But it's about understanding why that is and understanding who you are. You know, it's not about, because I mean, you know, in this country, I mean, my identity is I'm English, but my parents are from Jamaica. But so growing up, my house was very much patois and that, this and that, Bob Marley and Gregory Isaacs and music and this, that, and the other. But, you know, I could switch into my English, where I'm from, mate, and talk like I'm from the Black country or whatever. You know what I mean? But I knew my identity. I didn't know enough of my identity. I didn't know enough about my heritage until I got older. But I knew that, you know, something. I'm different. I like it. Yeah, I'm different. I actually like the fact that I was different to everybody else. It's like, yeah, man, I'm different. I can dance. None of you can dance. I can run fast. None of you can run.
Actually,
people.
I got something for you. When everyone can't dance, you're the only who can dance. Maybe you're the one who can't dance.
Yeah, I can't. Yeah. We had a whole discussion about this the other episode, but I can't dance.
Listen, man, from when you can follow 4 beats in the bar, you can dance. I've seen people go off.
I can't.
I've seen people waltz to bloody Michael Jackson music. It's like what?
Did you ever have you ever seen Seinfeld? Did you guys have that show over there?
We did have it.
I didn't see Seinfeld.
All right, so there's this thing called the Elaine Dance.
Oh yeah,
that she does in the show. That's me.
Oh my god!
Like,
no way,
that's me.
No
my
way.
Dancing.
That's the leg kicking out and all that stuff, and I'm like
leg kicking.
I'm like, what the hell is this? Anyway, getting back
but I do want to bring it back to about the biracial. This is again about going back to Black history, at least for in the United States. So part of my son being able to recognize himself as Black, and because I never considered him anything, and I purposely raised him in an environment where he wasn't anything. It was like every kid in our neighborhood was either Hispanic or Asian or something. There was like 2 whole race, white or Black people in our neighborhood when he was growing up. But he had to learn, as a lot of light-skinned people have to learn here in the United States, especially if they're biracial, is our history of discriminating within ourselves, which is another topic that we don't touch on in Black History Month. It's slightly touched on by when they say like the slave masters treated light-skinned slaves better, but they don't go into like those were the slave masters' children. They don't go into that later graduated to post-slavery light-skinned people being incorporated into society slightly more, not a lot, to where they in turn set up Black colleges, and dark-skinned people weren't allowed to go to those Black colleges. They weren't allowed to be a part of those social groups. Those, it was self-discrimination, and it's called the paper bag test. You have to pass a paper bag test. Like they'll hold it to your face, you're too dark. And you cannot be a part of this.
We ain't getting nowhere, Nigel. We're out.
What?
It's
and
real.
It's so prolific. It's so prolific that Alpha Kappa Alpha,
you're right. Oh, sorry.
Which is one of the largest sororities here, Black sororities here in the U.S. You had to pass paper bag tests. A sorority was started for the girls who could not pass the paper bag test called Zeta Phi Beta. To this day, and AKA swears that this is no longer part of their thing. To this day, you see a light-skinned girl in college, you know she's AKA. You see a dark-skinned girl in college, you know she's Theta Phi Beta. If you see a medium-skinned girl in college, I forget what the third one is, but there's like one for medium-toned girls. Like we are segregated like that, and they swear they don't do it anymore. But every time I see that AKA sign, some girl with a pink AKA, she's light-skinned, guaranteed. You had to be Whitley Gilbert. You could not be.
The thing is, right? Because I remember growing up, and my family, bloody West Indians, him tall black, him lip them tall big, him tall red skin.
Yeah, that's a South Hay thing, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's like, you know, it's that thing of who are you comparing it to? How are you going to get treated any better than it by anybody else? Because you know what I mean? I don't know, man. It's a bad thing. It's a real bad thing. I suppose there's always going to have been hate in history, even among Black people, because obviously you had tribes, you know, that have been divided down lines, who worship the sun, who worship the moon, who ate that meat, you know what I mean? So that hate is always going to be there between people, but I suppose it always feels more magnified when it's within our community, because we're fighting that many battles on that many fronts that you almost want everyone to say, well, listen, forget all this. Let's get on everyone our own backs. Let's just have the one mind and move forward.
And that's what I've been trying to advocate for here in the U.S. Because there's so much, because of the way, again, back to we're not taught history. So do you know how do they approach slavery in Europe when they first started off? How do they approach that? Do they teach you?
No, we don't learn it. We don't learn nothing.
We learn about American Black history.
Yeah, our Black history is your Black history, except where they have just before you continue, I've found something. It says in United Kingdom. Obviously, I was raised and born and raised in the United Kingdom, as was Nigel. In United Kingdom, Black History Month was first celebrated in October 1987, which year was also coincidentally the 150th anniversary of Caribbean emancipation, the centenary of the birth of Marcus Garvey, and the 25th anniversary of the Organization of African Unity. So we, like, our history goes back to 87, basically, and is based on Caribbean stuff. And then obviously we got Marcus Garvey, he was telling us about Africa, but we don't get taught that in school or anything. No one's telling us. We have to go to Saturday schools or private schools to find this out. They don't even mention it, but you will have, I think, is it Islamic? You have a bit of Islam, bit of Muslims history, bit of Indian history, but that's all under the guise of religion. But that's it. When you ask, hey, what about the African history? You guys were slaves.
Wow.
So, yeah, that was it. That's as far as I have.
Yeah. And the whole point of this is if we don't know history, we don't know, and also the way we're taught the history, we don't understand how society became the way it is. So, for example, the first thing we're taught, Africans sold themselves as slaves to Americans.
Yes, which is very dangerous.
And yeah, because it creates a animosity. People still repeat this to this day. Yeah, when we talk about unifying with Africans, like they sold us through them. Like, okay, first of all, if we can hang out with these white people, we can totally hang out with some Africans because it's not them. And they negate the part where they went and kidnapped whole tribes.
The thing
it was like two or three.
Someone saying that, if you think about it, they're basically reducing 300, 400 years of history to a 2-second response. You know what I mean? And to base that response there is I mean, like, oh wow.
And
wow.
Slavery, and even looking at how slavery was before chattel slavery. I mean, it used to be slaves were your servants. They went home. It was never beat them, breed them, cut off their limbs, that kind of stuff. I mean, okay, certain parts, people got limbs cut off, but that was even for non-slaves. Like Russia used to cut off limbs like all the times for their serfs, which were slaves. So, but serfs had a very different life than they weren't like caged. They weren't forced to breed with each other. There is a joke here in the U.S. that sometimes white people say is, of course, Black people are good at sports. We bred them that way.
Yeah.
So like bred like dogs. We're like a breed of animal to some people.
Yeah.
So we don't learn about that. It causes we don't know that about the kidnapping of African tribes. It creates an animosity towards these people, towards Africans. And then there's the issue of like Haiti and Dominican. We learned that Haiti had their first slave revolt. Okay, they were the first nation to free themselves. That's what we learned. Then we skip ahead to Haiti's the poorest country. The lesson we learn is Black people can't rule themselves. What they don't tell you is that
France have locked them into debt for 100 years.
And they just raped them of all of their finances, which is hilarious because France owes America so much money. And you know what happened after World War II? Every country that owed other people money was just like, you know what? All's good, except for France and Haiti.
Disgusting. Well,
but we don't learn that.
That you see, those issues aren't front and center of the news every day, being pushed in people's faces. And that's the reality of what we're going through, and that's why we struggle to get a unified voice, because if you think of some of the things that are going on now, which, the people power does work, the dollar, the wallets, the black pound, it works. But because we can't stand behind a cause and say, right, boom, okay, Haiti, right, from now on, boycott all French companies for the next month. And let's see if France can fix their minds a little bit, because Haiti have had earthquake after earthquake, disaster after disaster. They never even recovered from the earthquake they had in the bloody 80s, and they had another 2 hurricanes and all that since. But
and you know why they haven't recovered? Because all the money that was supposed to go for international aid for Haiti was stolen.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
I mean, the Red Cross got millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars to help Haiti. People cared. Do you know what happened? They built 5 houses.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. But because we haven't got that unified voice, which is what that's what we actually need as a race, is a unified voice. Because I think obviously it's divide and conquer. There's too many distractions for us to say, yeah, I'm going to stand behind that cause. People naively thought when 45 was in power that, yeah, man, he's racist.
And we don't say his name anymore. Is that everyone calls him 45? Is that what the deal is?
That's what it was. That's what our host says.
The perception out, in the world was, oh yeah, he's racist. black people would never vote for this guy. But then when you saw and dug a bit deeper, you saw that there was lots of black people who voted for this guy or for that party. And this is what I mean. It's like even down that very line where someone can be blatantly out there and be the opposite to what you should be listening to and your children should be listening to. But we'll still go for that because of something else. Well, it's the Republican Party. I've always voted for them. Or, their party's Christians, so I'm going to vote. You know what I mean? It's very...
Well, that goes back to the whole issue of understanding Black history. So one of the things people love to bring up is that the Republican Party is the party of Lincoln. Of course, there's a switch. Another thing we rarely learn in school, there's a switch with the Republican Party of Lincoln, who freed the slaves, and that was when the Democratic Party was like, oh, let's try to get some people up north. We're going to back this civil rights movement. And the Dixiecrats were like, no, F you. We keep our Blacks where they belong. And so the Republican Party is like, we don't care about the Black people anymore. And so there's a shift where these Southerners took power and it changed the dynamics of the party. But conversely, the Democrats have had the most damaging policies for Black people since slavery.
Yeah.
So I'm a fan of Blacksit.
They were actually the racist party. They were the racist party with Democrats at one time.
They are still. Let's be very clear. Obama was let's get a Black person in there. Then it's let's get a woman. But as far as actual genuine equality, they have consistently made the worst policies that damage Black communities since, I'd have to say, at least the 70s, over and over. You have the crime bill, that was Democrats. You have welfare reform, that's Democrats. It's I call them the party of white supremacy, but low key white supremacy. So you have overt white supremacy, and then low key, and we're at a point where we have no real options.
This is what I wanted to say is how come a country with so many people of colour, with so much power, and I'm going to wave my wallet around now, because a wallet is power, isn't it? A wallet with money in, if you can buy all that money, but all those people of colour contribute to the economy. How come they haven't created their own party? How come no one has created a third party?
Black people are, because of the way our government is set up. Okay, so in our country, you have to win by 51% of the vote, technically, for a lot of things. You have to get to, and by I say vote, I mean the electoral college, not the popular vote. So that's the first problem. We don't elect people with popular vote. We elect people with electoral college.
Yeah.
You have to get to 270s. Anytime there's a third party, it just splits in half, and whatever party that side leans towards is the party that loses. So the third party, if they have a really popular third party candidate, like Ross Perot was a really popular third party candidate in the 90s. He was a conservative. The conservatives lost the election. If we had Ralph Nader, a really popular third party candidate in the 2000s, Al Gore lost the election. You see how it works? A third party candidate makes it worse. The best thing we can do is push for the primary parties that we have right now to go away. To go our way. And so the Republicans have done a really great job of that by embracing their Tea Party base. Tea Party would be the equivalent of Dixiecrats. And by embracing that base, they got those votes, and that's how Trump was elected. The Democrats have never embraced the progressive base, at all. They're starting to, but that's a whole other issue.
But that's the thing, because you saying that, then I see another 100 years of this.
The easiest thing that Black people could do to get their voices heard, and this goes for everyone, is to stop voting all one party. If Black people were not always voting Democrat, then Democrats would feel like they have to work for their vote. If Black people were not always voting Republican, Republicans would stop trying to suppress their vote. If they feel like the job of our politicians is not to serve us, is to get elected. And so if they feel like there's no chance of you voting for them, they're going to first try to crush your vote, just make you not vote at all. And if they guarantee that you're going to vote for them, they're not going to do anything. They don't care. That is
This is
why
what I'm saying.
places like Detroit and Kentucky, which are very liberal, very conservative, are shitholes in our country. The most poverty we have in our country are in Detroit, which is 100% Democrat, 100% all the time, and Kentucky, 100% Republican, 100% all the time. And that's the worst poverty, to the point where it looks like a East Germany.
Yeah, East Germany.
Was it East Germany that was the
after the before the war fell?
Yeah, it looked
No,
like
no, you mean after the war? Yeah, you're right.
Before
yeah,
the war.
East Germany, yeah, before the war, yeah. The war.
But that's
Yeah.
what I'm saying. You're saying. I mean, in my mind, then that's another 100 years then of messing around, because these
so we'd
parties,
have to do is
you know,
we'd have to divide instead of unite.
They've got they've got fossils in the chamber. 80-year-olds making decisions about a country which is predominantly 25 to 45, maybe 55. And the only way to kind of get rid of them, in my eyes, would be to say, something, we've got to all get behind either this third vote, or we've got to create a party that's going to shake it up.
And I think that's what we did here in Georgia. But just to put it in perspective, in Georgia, the black people, the Asian people, the Latino people, our gay people, everyone united against Trump. People who usually didn't vote came to vote. It was a huge push. We were like, you're going to hear our voices. And we all voted this election. And the very next thing that the Republican Party did was introduce legislation to try to suppress the votes. And we even have our Republican legislators say on record saying, I don't care what you have to do. We need to make it so that we have a chance of winning. We have to get these votes. We have to stop it so that you can't, you have to vote on election day. So like no more having this whole week or 2 weeks to vote. You can only vote on election day. Well, black people in Georgia are working class for the most part, unless you're like a celebrity. Not everyone can get election day off. Election day is not a holiday here. So that's the very first thing they did was go to suppress their votes. And that will happen, especially in the South. And it will happen anytime they can. We see what it's happening in Ohio right now. Republicans in that area got control and immediately began suppressing the vote. There's so many ways that our black people are oppressed here, and not just black people. Although we have it, I'd say we compete with Native Americans for who has it the shittiest at any given time. Just to be very honest. And this message of unity is repeating from the 1960s, drawing everything back to black history. Yeah. What they don't say is when black men initially had the right to vote, they voted. We got black people elected. We had a overwhelming shift in the policies and who was winning. It was very much Republicans winning. So the very first thing they did was say, no, these black people now can't vote. We're going to find ways to make them not vote. So it became citizen tests, grandfather clauses.
You've got on mute.
All right. That's going to be muted.
A telemarketer just called me. Damn telemarketers. That was in response. So the initial pushback wasn't when black people voted. It was when black people voted and there was enough of them to push the states to a different direction. And that's what just happened. It's enough of us voted that pushed us to a different direction. I live in Georgia. Georgia's my home. Georgia is one of the most progressive states. And you would never think it because of the way people elect. Like people who get elected, and that's because of who votes, and that's because of who's allowed to vote. That's because of how our voting, the people who are in power, rig our voting system. And I don't mean
what do you mean by allowed? What do you mean by allowed to vote?
Exactly. I've had to go vote. In the 3 times I've gone to vote, between 18 and Obama. We'll just say between George W. Bush's second election and Obama. Every time I went to vote, except for twice, I was sent all around my city. No, you're registered here. No, you're registered here. No, you have to go here. No, you have to go here. You want to do a digital ballot? What was that?
I heard about that they send you on the merry-go-round.
Yeah, just everywhere.
That sounds fraudulent. That actually sounds like a rigged. How can any country bomb any other country and say, oh, we're going to bring democracy to you, when that very practice, what you're saying there, is completely undemocratic. It's completely
because we're not bringing democracy to other countries. Haven't you figured out
how
it works? We don't go there because we love democracy. We go there because we want your money and your resources.
Us being cynical.
All right, I just want to. I'm sorry to end this quickly because we're running out of time. I just wanted to say there's obviously the Dixiecrats, got this like Confederate flag, the classic, and a lot of people say it's not racist, but we see it, and that's the image I was showing earlier. The last thing I want to talk about quickly is I want to share this to you guys, and this is probably one of the.
It's okay if we run over, by the way, for me on my end. Okay. My next meeting's at 5:30. I just had to see. I got my calls done earlier.
Okay, someone put this on for the people of color. I think this is one of the issues we have among Black people. There's 5 types of minds or opinions that Black people have. There's obviously the revolutionary mind, which I reckon most of us here on Blackopolyse, we sit there. Although it's, we're not going to cause any trouble, but that's what we think. We need to figure out how we can make things better. Then you got the misguided. I would say.
I love that little kid. He's so funny.
Isn't this from the cartoon, the Boondocks? The Boondocks, isn't it? It's such a good cartoon. I tried to go for all of them. I'm going to need to finish them, but they're great. And then you got obviously the also the misguided. I would say a lot
old heads.
Old, yeah. I would say a lot of our parents' generation, they were misguided. Whatever's convenient, I would say a lot of the people would fit into this category, or obviously the ignorant to the culture and struggles. The self-hating, I think unfortunately, a lot of Black women fit into the self-hating category, I would say.
No, we don't.
You don't think so?
No. I know the Uncle Ruckus type, but I think Candace Owens is gotten people confused about how Black women are. If Black women were of the self-hating type, here in the States, then we would have gotten overwhelmingly. Black women voted overwhelmingly against Trump. I will not say for Biden because, I personally didn't vote for Biden. I voted against Trump. And we were at 90% of Black women.
Okay.
98% of Black women voted for Biden. Whereas 13% of Black men voted for Trump. And I don't feel like in either one of those cases is self-hating. It's more of an issue of, like I was explaining before, neither party really does much for anybody. And both parties have caused damaging effects for the Black community in one way or the other. When someone votes Republican, I don't consider them self-hating until they're out there like Candace Owens, every time something happens in the media, it's like, well, that Black man did this. No, Black people aren't racist, blah, blah, blah.
I think if you kind of, I suppose if you look at it from a psychological point of view, it becomes the choice of what's in it for me, doesn't it? And color. So you got some people who they're looking at the bigger cause, the bigger picture. It's about everybody, and then there's other people, which is white, Black, Indian, whatever, who what's in it for me, And some people won't have voted Biden because their views about Biden are that deep-seated, that deep-rooted from what he's been involved in the past, that they would actually have seen Trump as a better option, even though he was A, B, C, and D. I also know some people voted for 45 because of the religion, the religious connection with the Republican Party being perceived as the most religious and the most God-fearing and anti-abortion and all these other
Black
things.
People in America are very conservative. If it weren't for the racism aspect of the Republican Party, Black people would be Republican. By and large, we are the Bible Belt. Anywhere you have large populations of Black people outside of New York and LA is the Bible Belt. And even in those cities, we had, for example, in California in 2008, I think, they had a vote for gay marriage before gay marriage was legal here. And the Black people's vote is what pushed it over to the side of no. It was Proposition 8. Black people are very conservative.
Yeah. But that conservatism has been imposed on them through religion.
Yeah. And that religion was forced on us through slavery.
Exactly. Absolutely trampled into us. And this is what makes me laugh about. I remember about a couple of years ago, one of the African nations was saying, no, we will not make homosexual legal. And I think America said, we're going to sanction you if you don't, stop, if you don't allow gay marriage, whatever. But what the thing is, when you look at it, it's like, well, the Western world forced these views on these people. Before that, I think actually before some of this,
the Western world was still forcing those views. Every missionary that comes from the United States that goes to another country, they are there to force their views. They are there to say, we'll give you money if you make your people believe this.
I truly believe that there was a time where people didn't actually care about any of that. I truly believe that things just went on, and I actually believe that. But I think it became this thing where it was like, well, no, blah, 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 attach it to a religion. But I think if you go way back before all these doctrines, people would do whatever they were doing when they were doing it.
It depends on the culture. It depends on the culture and like which society. So, for example, here in the Americas, in many indigenous cultures, I can't say everyone because I can't speak for all indigenous cultures, but many indigenous cultures embraced men, women, and women were actually the leaders of matriarchal societies, and two-spirit, where like transgender people. And then homosexuality, not a big deal. You go to pre-Roman England and you find the same thing. People were gay, women loving women. You find that. And then you find in certain pockets, like I call it like that little triangle between Italy, part of North Africa, and Spain. That little area was actually very already homophobic. But you go to areas in Asia and you have the reverse. There was like a lot of non-homophobia, except for little pockets. And it really just depends on where, I guess you can say. I don't think there's ever a time where people welcome homosexuality universally around the world pre-religion, because we've never been pre-religion. And every religion has an inherent aspect of homophobia. Hinduism has it. Islam definitely has it. Islam, Hinduism, Christianity definitely has it. And then, but you have countries where the people are mostly animist, or ancestral worship, where it's not a big deal because there's no one saying, "Hey, hate this."
Hate this. Read this. Hate this. Read this. Hate this. I would love to know what our religion was.
You know what?
Before
this is interesting, but I want to do that maybe next week because I want to try. I'm trying to get down in topics, like instead of like
sorry.
around. I think religion comes in.
You started it by saying black women were self-hating. How dare you?
Well, no, I was referring to the fact that, and I think, so, like for example, also black men. I think when black men say they don't date black women, I think they're self-hating too.
What is self-hating though?
That's like when you
it's when you don't want to identify with your own people.
Yeah,
you don't want to acknowledge the struggle.
Yeah, I think there's black men out there who are stupid and they'll be like, I've met guys here, especially American men. I never really knew too much with English guys, but I know American men I met when I got into Germany, and they were like, I don't date black girls. I'd be like, why not, dude? And they're like, yeah, because it's too much like my sister or whatever. Oh, huh? No, like, never heard of that before.
And it goes back to, again, with Black history. So here's the thing that's not often discussed, and we had a conversation like this on our last one. So I want to talk about how Black men were treated in our country. All right, this is what this is like some big stuff. All right, so you bring the slaves over. You have some slaves men, they're big, strong men. They're not going to do They're not going to do this. You can't fight. They will fight you. They'd rather die than be subjugated to you forever, especially once the difference of how slavery was. And like I said, they captured tribes and brought it wasn't, here's our slaves, now they're used to being slaves, so we're going to send them to be slaves somewhere else. It was like, here's a king, now the king's not king anymore, he's a slave, so you had these like proud men. Y'all are going to cringe at this. All right, do you know what bronco busting is?
Yeah, I know what they used to do. They used to strap them up and then get to behind and
And then they took it to the next step. So beyond that, they would rape the Black women in front of the Black men, hold the Black men down, and they would rape us. Societies across the world would view a woman who's been raped as like desecrated, dirty. No. And then you have the dynamic of the white woman. So you raped this woman you raped my woman. I'm going to get your woman now. Like it created that dynamic that lasted for a very long time. And I feel like that was the foundation of the white woman as a trophy for Black men. Not all Black men. I have to emphasize that. I don't believe all Black men believe this, but some people are asses. And I can't say Black women don't have that attitude, because I had a friend when I was in high school who said she doesn't date N-words. Black, like super dark skinned Black girl. I don't date N-words.
You'd be like,
okay.
Actually, I was supposed to get like that the other day. And I was like, what kind of
inwards, you know?
Yeah. Trust me, some people are messed up. And that's this ignorant and don't want to recognize their struggle. The last one in the list.
And so that dynamic pours, and this is the stuff that we're not taught in school. Remember I told you there's 2 Black histories. There's memorizing names and dates, and then there's understanding what happened and in the context of how it happened and how that led to what society is today. These are things we're not taught in school, and so it allows for these things to repeat and propagate. I'm not a good speaker today. It allows them to keep just going and going and festering within the Black community. But if we were taught that the reason why Black men started leaving Black women and their families in like the 80s and 70s wasn't because Black men just were so used to slavery, but because the government actually was like, you couldn't get help for your families. So let's say you were impoverished and you were poor and you were struggling and you couldn't eat. Guess what? Your wife, your girlfriend, your woman could get federal help to help your kids if you weren't there.
No.
It was for single women.
It was forced to leave.
Yes, so they sold the men, and then they forced the men to leave, and then they stole the men again through forced incarceration.
Crazy.
Every single thing that's been done has been done
calculated
instinctively to calculated efforts to destabilize the African American community. The same thing is being done with Native American communities here in the U.S. And I never mentioned Black history without also mentioning Native American, because one, and people get mad about me about this. One, we equally suffer. Two, Native Americans are ignored. And if we had their numbers added to us, we'd be a little bit bigger in power, I guess you could say, as shown in Arizona here in the United States, where all the Native Americans all voted for Biden. A Republican state that's never gone blue went blue because of the voice of Native Americans. And it also goes back to, they practiced it on the Irish and the Scottish. Well, Rome went to Britain. Then they practiced their years and years of oppression on the Irish and Scottish, perfected it in China with the whole getting people hooked on drugs, in India, putting people against each other, took all those things that they learned from conquering the whole world and have been using it here in the United States for hundreds of years.
Wow.
And if you don't know that, if you don't see the pattern of how it happens, then all you see is a bunch of Black people who can't get ahead, a bunch of Native Americans who are just too busy crying about their missing land, a bunch of Asians who, they should just go home, blah, 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 if they don't like it here. You have to learn everybody's history to see how they just keep doing the same damn thing over and over. No different than what Europe did in Africa when they redrew those damn lines about what countries where to make sure they have warring tribes in the same country that are going to be fighting for control forever.
That's the one. Tribes. Split them down the line, turn them into tribes. Then we ain't got to worry about them because they'll kill each other.
Yeah.
Yep. Tutsi and Hutu.
That's who we are.
Whew. Well, that was deep, man. That was deep. So you only share your knowledge with your son?
For history, when it comes to history stuff, he wanted me to start a YouTube channel for history. I used to do this. I used to do this thing called Ghetto History.
No, listen, man. Either get away. If you like to write, then write. If you like to speak, then do a video, do it on YouTube. But the thing is, the only way people are gonna learn is if people talk
like
about
you.
it.
Yeah,
and
like you.
If you're not talking about it without being horrible, you're part of the problem, because I've learned so much from
people.
I've learned so much from you today, right? Now I'm saying that you have a superpower. Use it for the good of man. Use it for the good of the Black man, and share your
a lady.
Even if you do, the Black man, the Black lady. Even if you do 100 videos and you know, obviously you need someone to maybe talk to you and ask you questions. But
well,
seriously,
Key's part of Blackopolyse now.
Man.
Not Key.
Share that knowledge. Don't keep it hidden. Don't keep it hidden any longer, please.
Okay,
I'll say it like this. I am now. Okay, I'll say it like this because I know it sounds bad that so I thought about doing this, and in fact, it was supposed to be a joke that I was going to do Black history because I used to do this joke for my son where I'd tell history in like this really ghetto accent, like, and then this nigga was like, "What?" You know, but
don't do that.
when I was like helping with world history, but I looked and there's just so many people already doing the history and they're doing it way better than I am. And then half the stuff I learned, you know, some of the stuff I get from Simon Whistler. I started off learning British history from Simon Whistler on Today I Found Out, and then just consumed all that I could find out because I was just in love.
But that doesn't matter because the thing is, right, okay, I teach people how to market their business. If I was worried about other people and being better in that, then I might as well just not bother doing it. But the reality is I can change the lives of every single person I come into contact with. And if that's 100 people, guess what? I've done a better job than the person who hasn't. So all I'm saying is, by you sharing that knowledge, forget other people, forget what they're doing. This is about you. This isn't about them. This is about what you can bring to the world and what you can leave in the world. This is about what you can share. This is about how you can make someone's mind change from, oh, there's no hope, to, oh my God, I didn't realize about this factor, this person. I didn't, you know what I mean? So it's not, you know, something that's down to yourself, but please, you have a superpower. You know what I mean? Use it wisely, man.
I'm working on getting into media. I'm an associate producer on a TV show now, and actually just got hired to write a movie, my first movie, by like a major motion company. And I can't go into too much about the movie itself, but it's about all white women. Okay, it's a complete all white women movie, and it's a historical drama. And I made sure to include like a Black person trying to do what the white person does, and it's like no.
Okay.
So I'm starting from there because and then from when I make this movie and I get this movie made, I'm going to just start telling these stories, and I incorporate in my writing realities of how the world is. So it's not like I'm completely silent on it. It's just I haven't had a platform yet to make it big. And you gotta trust me. Everything I've discussed, I'm about to have a fight with someone I know when I'm telling them that a character is going to have to say the N-word. And I was reading a book and it was like called The Darky Jig. I'm like, she has to say this. It has to be said. And I know it's going to be combative because you're supposed to hero. So I'm like, well, your hero isn't necessarily my hero. So we got to be realistic about what the white women were like in here.
Yeah.
And so we'll see how it goes. But everything I write, I incorporate reality and how things goes. And there's always conversations like this between characters.
All right.
It's like my different world moment.
That was great. Quay, can we get you on again in a couple of weeks? And we can do. I'll write you. We'll work it out.
Yeah.
I'll write you, man.
Thanks for being here again, Quay. Nigel's got to get your name right. He's going to get your name right.
It's okay.
I called you Key, didn't I?
Yeah, because we know it's talking.
Yeah, it's okay. It's Key to you guys. The only time I'm offended when I'm called Key is if someone from Thailand calls me Key, because in Thailand, Key means poop. So I don't, like, you call me anything and
Quay.
I didn't know Quay spoke Thai.
No, in Thailand, Key is poop.
Okay.
The word Key. My name is poop in Thailand. So that's the only time I don't like it being mispronounced.
Miss Key.
Anyway, Nigel, you got to tell us about your new program you're working on.
Well, I'm working on a few things, man. At the moment, it's all about love sales, hate selling, and digital marketing. We're just about to launch a new product to help people get more reviews from their customers. So yeah, come and check me out. We do some business owner interviews 2 a week. Also had some really great guests on. Yeah, come and find it. Come and see what some of the tips that they've shared. And yeah, I'm there. Love sales, hate selling.
Great. Well, guys, I thank you for listening and watching today, and I hope you enjoyed the show and you was informed. Next week we'll continue our chat about Black history. and we'll find out more about the culture and the religions and everything else that's happened to us in the past.
Don't forget to go to Quasi180.com.
And that's
Crazy.
Crazy. All right, man. A bit like Jay-Z. Okay, guys. Okay. I'll see you later.
Bye. Bye.
KZ180.
KZ180. Yeah.
All right. Bye-bye, guys.
Bye.
See you later.